question the narrative.
Okay.
Don't just, believe something because somebody on TV said it, or you heard it from somewhere, or you were taught it in school, or whatever. Just, start doing your own research and and your own community is a great place to start. It's a long conditioning process. And so, the main thing is just getting information that kind of help reframe that, and change that perspective, because we're only hurting ourselves by not focusing on the source of the problem. We feel cut off from everything, from each other, from nature. And again, that's part of the amazing being alive today, is that we're seeing the awakening happen in real time.
All the links to Michelle's pages are in the description of this video. They include her patron page, her blog website, and
to get some pictures to what I'm saying. Families, lumber baron families, were said to build these places and railroads. They're starting to harvest the resources that are there, and this area has a lot of trees. You have railroads existing in North Carolina prior to the Civil War, and that I believe that these battles were to destroy the infrastructure, and not what we're told. It was already there. This courthouse in Randolph County in Asheboro, has that beautiful Greco-Roman style with the columns, and then, can't think of the name of that, but this beautiful architecture. You've got a little bit of mud floody kind of looking things going on here with the windows down here. It actually looks like there might be some more below ground, and these are just above ground. This war memorial would have been an original structure, maybe not the statue on top of it, but this part would have been, and that would have been part of the free energy, because this would have had a top to it, like a steeple. And they take them down routinely for a lot of these old buildings, what was originally there, which was part of the antiquity. This location in North Carolina became a textile production center. So they were making hosiery, textiles, and so forth here. This would have been repurposed architecture. And then they also had furniture manufacturers here. And this whole region that I'm going through is, heavy on these mills. And these mills were part of that system of economic slavery that they were installing everywhere. I gave example of something called the big chair spy. And, they have it on this limestone pedestal, and they said it was built in 1922, and the original was torn down, and then they built another one. And I think it's very likely that was a giant's chair. And then they're just giving us, a story for it. They want to display it somewhere.
Question.
Yeah.
So just to be sure, there's a good potential this was an actual chair once used.
I believe that.
And this is just a display of them making a statement, so to say, for those who can see it.
That it was built as a replica of a particular type of armchair that was built at the Thomasville Industries.
All right.
And then nearby, there's the big bureau. Another story given about that. It was also a tourist attraction. And redone. I found another giant chair in Anacostia, historic neighborhood in Washington, D.C. And it was also said to have been built as a replica by a local furniture company. We have a history of giant in North America, and this is the missing skeletons and the Great Smithsonian cover-up. And this is in Long Beach, Washington, the world's largest frying pan. And then this one's in Indonesia. That's also a giant frying pan that was unearthed in 2016.
Now, a frying pan, was it not something else?
It was probably these were probably frying pans, but just given as the example, like this one in Long Beach, Washington, was a replica of one that a woman skated on bacon in the town's clam festival in 1941. So they're using them as bizarre roadside attractions. You can go and see, and they're framing how they want you to see it.
Okay, but these are replicas.
Well, they're not replicas, but we're told that they are.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay.
So this original. So again, the giants were real, and they were. It's like they're taunting us, or they're putting it right in front of our faces that there were giants here, and they've removed the evidence from most places. But you can still find certain things on the internet, and it's just what you find when you go through the area. You find, showed you the research triangle earlier with the GMO manufacturers. This is the Piedmont Triad just right next to it, and this is major cities in this area, and they're also geometric shapes. So we're talking about why is everything in alignment? Everything's laid out geometrically. And so these are just two examples of places you can point to and say, hey, this is interesting. It's not random.
Question. On the note of that previous image, would that be what one would consider a grid system? Or
I believe that's what it's showing, that it's part of the grid system.
If it's not clear yet, what are grid systems?
So what it's come down to us today is they want us to only see the lines of latitude and longitude as a grid. The original grid system is a system of ley lines. Again, this information's been removed, but everything was geometric, mapped out. Along these ley lines, which were groomed energy lines of electromagnetic energy, and very powerful and very important. And even today, just anomalous stuff happens, but synchronistic stuff happens. And when I say anomalous, it's almost like there's a consciousness that's still communicating. And a lot of people, including myself, which I got into this whole thing in the first place, have a soul connection with these grid lines, which are hugely important to the true history of the Earth. And that when the controllers came in to take over everything, they did it through these grid lines.
I see.
Which they've hidden. So it's the idea that everything geometrically laid out perfectly on the Earth, but all we are told about are lines of longitude and latitude.
So these are basically the PowerPoint of Earth.
That's a good way of putting it. There's things that are more powerful than others. But it's been removed. And don't know if that's where I really first got a little bit of an education. I've been reading stuff that I could find over the past few years. But I was in London in 2010, and this is before I started waking up to all this. But I grabbed this little book in a bookstore in London called Earth Grids, Secret Patterns of Gaia's Sacred Sites. And there's some good information in this little book. And it just got me wanting, I read some other books, but I was wanting more information. And so it kind of broke down some of the geometries within this grid system, like what I've been showing you with these triads in North Carolina.
Yeah.
But there's even more complex shapes than that in the landscape. But everything is connected back to this whole idea. And this has all been hidden from our awareness.
Would it be just safe to say that these grid lines or systems are like the veins to a body where the blood runs?
I do believe there's a correlation.
Okay.
So, so this is definitely a part of my education. And then this has been around for a while. The chakras of the earth and the great dragon lines and their locations on the earth. It seems to be coming back a lot through people that just have some kind of connection, or this man Hugh Newman is a dowser. A lot of dowsers have contributed back to this. So these geometric shapes here would have been part of this grid system. More railroads through here. And then this is where I learned about plank roads, which caught my attention because that was new to me. This was intersected by the 1852 Great Western Plank Road. We're falling in the 1850 time frame again. And that the plank road boom was supposed to have lasted between 1844 to the mid-1850s, with more than 10,000 miles or 16,000 kilometers of plank roads built across the country. And so the photos I was finding were showing these landscapes covered in sand and dunes, and this is all across the country. And this little ad here for Kalamazoo, they're looking to build a plank road up in Michigan. So this wasn't limited to any one part of the country. These are different places across the country. And this part of North Carolina had a plank road too. So it's like they were trying to build some way to cross these landscapes that were covered in sand and dunes. More textile mills, cotton mills through this area. And these mills really started emerging in the early to mid 1800s that were company towns, where one company owned practically everything in the town and was the main employer. So people had nowhere else to go. So they're basically forced to work in these subsistence wage jobs where they can't go shopping anywhere but the company store. They get educated in company schools, go to company churches. And, we're also getting into the mines of West Virginia, where the story is the same. And going through Appalachia, historically, one of the poorest regions in the United States, even today and historically. And, you can look it up, believe that the cycles of poverty came as a direct result of these company towns. And then they drain the land of resources, and then they go overseas and set up the same company over there. And more often than not, leave these mountain towns high and dry. So when I say they rigged the system to get as much as they could from what was available, including people, then they just up and move and start the whole process somewhere else. So that's the system that they imposed. And this university here in High Point also has some giant rocking chairs. And then I'm going to try to go through this. There's a lot of information in here. This is like a over 2 hour video. I talked about the carillons. These that are amazing, that are very tall. There's a story behind how they were built. And again, I think that's all pre-existing. And then I talked about the organs and the solfeggio window, solfeggio frequency-shaped cathedral windows, and how that sound would be going out from the building there. And then if you look at the comparison of piano notes and the cathedral rose window shapes, they tuned it to 440 from 432, and you wouldn't realize it, but that affects us negatively. And then we talk about giant trees, and I absolutely believe that this was one, Pilot Mountain. And it's described as a quartzite monadnock. And then some other examples of that include these places, including Devil's Tower. This one in Norway. This is Carrara in Australia. You've got a solar alignment here. Just not unusual. I was showing examples earlier. If you look at tree stumps, actual tree stumps, and you can see pictures of that. And then you have these examples of Devil's Tower from a different angle where it looks like a tree trunk. This one's in Tunisia, the Jugurtha tableland. And then this is a volcano in Yemen called Hara of Arha, looking like a tree stump. And, so there definitely seems to be a connection between these giant trees and volcanoes also. And I'm getting kind of the feeling that the giant tree will find somewhere volcanic, somewhere water. And then you've got earth and air and ether. So there was probably a different elemental function that they were playing. I was talking about these mud flood type examples, again, where there's this just uneven shape going around the building. Like there's something going on underneath. The original building was. I'm believing that the earth shifted and buckled, and they just laid the pavement over where it ended up. You see the same kind of thing going on in Malta. This was the Royal Opera House before it was bombed during World War II. And, there's the sidewalk doing that. Same thing where there's buildings higher down here than it is up here.
Right.
We're going through some areas. So this is a muddy looking street in Galax, Virginia. This is in the Appalachians. Railroad history here. Swamplands here that was covered with poplar and pine. They ended up a swamp. And then there was a railroad history here, and the railroads were taken out, and it was turned into a walking trail. And that happened in a lot of places. So why would you go through the trouble of building a railroad and then taking it out within a short period of time?
Right.
So a lot of this infrastructure, this hydro, I absolutely believe was original infrastructure. And then I'm going through this area to show how it compares to other places with railroads and waterfalls. And in places not only all over the country, but all over the world, you find railroads going along these rivers. There's another fancy courthouse in McDowell, West Virginia. And the troubled mining history and mine labor relations throughout that region. And what was going on with that. Massacres and things like that. Poor working conditions, mine disasters, deaths. Anyway, like I said, this is a large one. I'm gonna go ahead and scroll through because there's just a ton of information in here. But I did want to show how these railroads go along these rivers and how that seems to be connected to the energy grid system as well. And that's not just in one place, that's all over the place. It's a place called the Low Moor Iron Company in Low Moor, Virginia. The name shows up in different places. I want to show you Gary, Indiana. I think that's where I'm going, but I'm making the point that there's swamplands all along here. There's deserts with dunes. There's the Indiana Dunes Park in the southern shore of Lake Michigan. And the Wright brothers story is extremely suspect. Monument in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Just like, stop with the lies, everybody. We're done. Okay. So what we're told about Gary, Indiana, is Project City. It's right next to the Indiana Dunes State Park and National Park. And Gary was supposedly named after one of the founders of U.S. Steel in 1901. And this is what the land looked like before they decided to start building in 1906, that it was a wasteland of drifting sand and patches of scrub oak. No one lived there, and there was no agricultural value to the land. There's railroads going through this area. And the first shovelful of sand was turned in 1906 to create the new steel town of Gary. And the laborers were housed in tents and shacks, digging trenches, as very little work was being done above ground. And then 2 years later...
How many years later?
2 years later, by 1908, excuse me, the city of Gary had taken on its shape and form.
Wow.
So it went from being a desert wasteland to a city.
In 2 years.
And they called it the Magic City. How about that? And then it became home to the largest steel mill complex in the world. And it's still, and that was in 1908. So that would have been after the first shovelful of sand had been turned for the city. Site of one of the first steel strikes. The law declared federal troops were brought in to put it down. Go back to work. Since the decline of the steel industry, a lot of the places there were abandoned. So, it's kind of a whole idea that you've got the robber barons at the top getting rich and fat off of the labor of all the people. So anyway, that's an example of how that's one ley line where there's literally all along that ley line, and I didn't show it all. There's swamps and deserts. So it's like the land was just, destroyed, ruined.
Okay.
And somebody came in and monetized the resources, got the labor force, and harvested the resources for their own benefit. That's how they got so rich. The ones that have been oppressing everybody. They don't like us, any of us. They just use whatever they have to flip the narrative so we don't know we're being manipulated to fight each other instead of the people that are actually responsible. Question the narrative.
Okay.
Don't just, believe something because somebody on TV said it, or you heard it from somewhere, or you were taught it in school, or whatever. Just, start doing your own research and and your own community is a great place to start. And, if you're inclined to do your own research and you look it up and see what is said about it, what humanity was capable of was far greater than what we've been told and what they actually built and the legacy they left. And the nice thing about being a truther in today's day and age is what we're seeing play out right now. And, to hear right is wrong and wrong is right, especially if it doesn't feel right. And, the Vatican Library has been known about for a long time. Bilderberg has been known about for a long time. Illuminati's been known for a long time. If you've been following the history, it has been. The Trilateral Commission. There's so much that has kind of been out there, but it's always kind of been swept under the carpet and played down. And no, we don't, we're having this meeting in Geneva, but we're not going to tell you what we talked about. And, it's been coming out in different ways, but these beings do not have our best interest at heart whatsoever. We're just an energy source and a food source for them.
Yeah.
And a wealth source. That's all. And that's everybody. The term conspiracy theorist was put out there in a pejorative way to cut off anybody questioning the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And, make those people sound like lunatics. You name it. Their days are coming to an end, the ones that have been in control. And they've lost control of the narrative. And so, now's a good time to be saying these things because people can finally see, those with eyes to see that there's something very wrong happening now and in the past. But we couldn't see it in the past because our best instincts have been manipulated. So wars, for example, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, we're going to go save the world from these, bad people. Yay us. And that was all part of their plan too.
Right.
That's what the United States was. The United States was like the military for the New World Order. And so all the things that happened everywhere else, now they're trying to bring here and destroy Western civilization as we know it and bring in their own version of it. And the idea of preserving general humanity and the humanity after that is not in their head. They want damaged individuals. They like it. They're promoting mental illness.
Yeah.
And so, that's what they want. They want that version of. They don't want a free-thinking, creative, happy version of humanity. And again, I wish I had a happier story to tell about where we've been up until now. I believe that we're on the cusp of a major change that's going to go back in our favor. But that's why anybody whether me or yourself, Mohammed, or whoever that has any inclination to do this kind of either research. I have the blog along with my YouTube channel. I know a lot of people like us that have started their own channels just because they had something they wanted to get out there. We're all part of this effort of piercing the veil of illusion so people wake. Because if we don't, we're the ones that are hurting ourselves. So just in closing, to finish up my thoughts on that, race and religion have been used to divide humanity when that should never have happened. And it's a long conditioning process. And so, the main thing is just getting information that will kind of help reframe that and change that perspective, because we're only hurting ourselves by not focusing on the source of the problem, which is actually these very greedy, negative beings that don't like us, that don't want us to exist in natural form. They want that too. I hope I've provided a lot of information that helps. I know there's more.
There always is.
It'll take a couple hours.
I'm very happy to have the opportunity to actually have you speak also. I think the more conversations like these take place, which is practical evidence, everything you've shown, people can see for themselves. And at the end, it's as simple as you said. I think there's something about information and people's ability to just be aware of it. I think that enough begins to change something. Little at a time.
The importance of being aware, that's a really good word. And not just blindly accepting. Whether it's something that you're told or something that you've believed your whole life. I think the reason I was able to do this work is because I unplugged from the Matrix a long time ago. Especially after I joined the Army in 1982. Actually, I graduated from high school in 1981. I had a year of college and I joined the Army. And that set my path in a different direction of what it would have been had I not. And that was really when I started unplugging.
Oh. For most people, it's usually the opposite. that form of, that path or that indoctrination actually gets them deeper into it. They buy deeper into it because there's a lot of conditioning involved in those also. For you, it's the opposite. I was going to ask that. I was going to ask what made you more inclined to basically start looking? Because I think everyone intrinsically knows the truth. People are not stupid. People just feel a bit of fear and maybe lazy to not think beyond what's given to them. But when you begin to look, I think is where things really happen. What made you start to look? Or what series? I know it's never just one isolated thing. And naturally, it's part of what you are here to do. You chose this before coming here. But what was that series of turning point that got you to start doing the research?
Well, that started it because when I joined the Army, I broke away from home. Had I stayed home, the pull to be there would have been very, very strong. It's been quite a battle, even though I, started that path because I had a mother that wanted me nearby. But I appreciate her. But I think I didn't, even if I wasn't consciously aware of it. And I was able to make those choices, like at that time when I joined the Army, and I lived in different places, different experiences that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And then I got out of the Army and went to college, which is why I went in. And then I married the former Army sergeant in the Army, was retired, that I had met in Germany. And then we moved away. And I've lived in different places ever since. So it's like I've gotten this, continuous stream of information, different places, books, people, experiences, and then asking a lot of questions, being interested in alternative history research. And then it really came together for me personally when I met a Moorish American man that brought me the piece about the Moors. And when that happened, it's like this giant puzzle together. And that's why I've been able to get so far with it. That, when you see this ancient advanced worldwide civilization of melanated people come into focus, that was the highest form of human expression that ever existed on Earth. And that when the controllers came in, they just completely flipped the narrative and brutalized and marginalized people that had created this civilization and, higher consciousness aspects of what it means to be human. And then, instilled this great divide on the basis of skin color. And for me, I really had a desire to know what the truth was. And I didn't have any preconceptions as to what it was going to look like. And when I found that star tetrahedron in North America and I started connecting dots, I came to conclusions. I didn't have pre-existing conclusions. I came to them after I connected all these dots. And I always found what I was looking for. So the consistency was always there, no matter where on the earth. I mean, you could look at Tierra del Fuego, the tip of South America, and find the same thing that you find in Iceland. And so I really felt like I needed to, as soon as I got the big picture, I needed to find a way to get it out. And that was when I started to blog and then make the videos. And that was in June of 2018, like I said earlier. And then from there, it's just gotten way deeper. So I feel like, okay, we got a live one. When I said I want to know the truth, and they just went, wow, careful what you wish for.
Right.
But it's also very gratifying to be able to do this.
Yeah, your work is very much appreciated. So do you think the change of things, do you think it was just limited to the physical act of doing things, or do you think there are other spiritual portions to it that aid the physical things from actually moving and changing?
My answer would be yes, in the sense that if you look at this as a colossal battle between good and evil, and evil's had a chance to mess with good to the extent that it has. There's certainly dark forces that are powerful, that have been part of the problem that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the unseen as well as the seen, and we don't see that. They've shut down our third eye and given us fluoride and whatever else they've done so that we wouldn't have an open third eye. We feel cut off from everything, from each other, from nature. And again, that's part of the amazing being alive today, is that we're seeing the awakening happen in real time in a way that previous generations could not. Even within the last couple of years, it wasn't visible. Like I mean, my husband died on December 1st of 2001, complications over a long period from Agent Orange. And he had a very hard death, but he died a couple of months after 9/11. So that was one of the last things that he saw, and he was devastated. And he died too young. He died at the age of 57. And I just know he would be absolutely horrified by what's going on these days. It's not the army, it's not what he stayed in the army for and what he based his life and beliefs on. And so I'm sad that he not. He's a good man, but I just, it would be so hard on him to see what's going on. And I don't know. It just seems to have changed so much in the last couple of years to where it's becoming more and more obvious that something's at work that wants its day, but they're not gonna win.
What do you think those who firmly believe in? Because some who go into the military do firmly believe in what they're told, and they do it with their heart. Do you think if those pockets of people in reality were to see a little bit beyond the mundane, how would you think they would react initially? I know you're a different case, but so would your state of mind. If they were to begin to see things like, do you think they would be willing to accept it? Or how would you think it would be? Because I think those group of people play a huge role. And I think they can also make the change also.
That's a good question. And, like there's so many layers to it, but I can talk from my personal experience. The military can make you or break you. And I joined in 1982. Basic was in October of 82. It hadn't been too long since they had tried integrating men and women, and then they separated them back out again. So I was in an all-female platoon, and that was pretty, I don't know how long that lasted. Women weren't in combat or anything like that. We had to train a little bit, but it wasn't emphasized.
Okay.
And I had a little bit of a struggle with my weight. That was the biggest challenge for me when I was staying within their requirements. But I decided I wanted to do, and when I had a chance to get out from that, I lost weight. And where I'm going with that is, it was almost like a self-selecting process in a way, because the people that weren't suited for it didn't make it out of basic, or when they got to their duty station, they got into a lot of trouble. I know when I was stationed in Germany, there was a lot of problems with drug use within the military intelligence community I was with. And you don't want to mess with that stuff in a foreign country if you're an American. So I know there were some people that I had gone to training with that ended up in a German prison. Things like that. So you could either, take that as a stepping stone and go far, or you could either get into more trouble than you could ever imagine. And, I think people's print at that time. And so there was still a stigma attached to people who were homosexual. That was in the 80s. And things have just completely reversed in terms of social trends, shall we say. So it's harder to answer that from the difference 40 some years make. But there's certain things within the military that you don't have in the regular, construct. And so that could possibly end up being a saving grace, and we'll see. This, because if you get in trouble in the military, it's really much harder, or at least it used to be. Something you want to do. So we'll just see how this plays out and what role the military has in what's coming up. Because I suspect it might have a role.
Right. It always does.
And not in a bad way, but I think it's in a good way. Because the military is the only place with those kinds of hard and fast consequences. So we'll see. I don't know. But that would be my guess. But for me, it was a transformative experience because I had new experiences. I was challenging myself. I got money for college. I broke old patterns when I moved away from home. That set the course for the rest of my life. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you went through all that, because you're helping a lot of people, one way or the other. You are. We are.
Thank you. So, much appreciated.
Are there any questions that I should have asked or used this opportunity to ask that I didn't?
I think you covered, I think we were able to include a number of your questions in the material that I presented. There were some things I had pulled up I didn't go into, but that, that'll take us a long time to go through all of that. But
what are they?
On YouTube. So this is a research that I did called Recovering Lost History from the Estuaries, Pine Barrens, and Elite Enclaves off the Atlantic Northeast Coast of the United States. That's what I would direct your attention to. And another is Star Forts, Gone By Trolley Parks and Lighthouses of New York's Hudson River Valley and New York Bays. And then if you go to my YouTube channel that I did with two other gentlemen, and one is Presenting Compelling Evidence for the Harvesting of the Earth's Energy Grid System and Us, and the Destruction, Exploitation, and Reverse Engineering of the Earth's Grid System. So these two here detail things that I do believe are going on and have happened, and what happened to the grid and that kind of thing, with quite a bit of evidence. So when I say I think that the Philadelphia experiment had something to do with this, I'm not saying that with nothing to back it up. And you can find that evidence in those.
Those videos were 2 months ago.
Within the last couple of months, and then the blog posts are back a little bit further. But it's all been this year.
All right. Shell, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation and everything.